of their population is under 25 years of age. 50% of our population in Malaysia are under 35. So we're going to see the youthing of politics here, but I think we will take our protests to the blogosphere and not to the streets, because we're Malaysia. All right. What we've seen is the Facebook generation of Egypt awakened to change from being just subjects to being real citizens. They had been frustrated. They'd been overlooked. They were filled with upbeat messages and youthful fervor, and they had achieved a revolution. It was for the first time in history a peaceful revolution. That's extraordinary. In the past, we've had the French Revolution, which sent all the aristocrats to the guillotine. We had the Cromwellian Revolution in England, which executed the not-so-merry monarch, Charles I. You had Tiananmen Square. It all happened in squares. We'd better keep an eye on Merdeka Square. But it all, Tiananmen Square in China. And emotions were very combustible. However, in Egypt, perhaps the most intriguing factor was they were angry, they were protesting, but they were peaceful. You know, they actually cheerfully swept and cleaned the streets that they had stormed in a very, very peaceful manner. As you know, it started a domino effect throughout the Middle East. How does that compare with us? Well, it ought to make you think and be thankful. We got independence, we got democracy, we got parliamentary Westminster-style government by the most peaceful means. We didn't have to take to the streets. There were no placards screaming, "Brits go home." I was here, nobody attacked me. And you had in fact a gentlemanly negotiation conducted by one of our greatest gentlemen, Tunku Abdul Rahman, a true gentleman. And he negotiated that independence and celebrated it every year in a square, Merdeka Square, where he raises his fists all the time and shouts Merdeka. And that's the only shouts that we've had in obtaining our democracy. I'd like to use the analogy of the snake. You see, the snake does shed its outworn skin in the hope that its new skin will be beautiful, bright, and better. And at the moment, there's a mood everywhere, including Malaysia, for change. We want change, but it's change with hope. However, don't overlook an important point about the snake. It may change its skin, but the head remains intact. The head of the snake is the traditions, the customs that they inherited from the past. And those traditions and culture go back to the colonial period, the British civil service, the British education system. Those were the head, the parliamentary government, democracy from day one. Those were the head of the snake. A functioning democracy from day one. There wasn't as much public space to begin with, but there has been, has there not, since the democratic dividend of the 2008 election, where we got a two-party system and an opposition, and we got the riots speaking up. And so we're able to vent our anger, speak our minds, in the blogosphere, if not in the streets. There was one exception to 51 years of peaceful development, and that was in 1969. I was here. Yes, it was racial, and it taught us a lesson. The lesson was that in a country as diverse as Malaysia, multiracial, multi-religious, multicultural, if you take to the streets in demonstration, there will be a danger that it will turn to violence and to bloodshed. We had one experience, and it taught us a lesson that Malaysians don't take to the streets. It taught us we've lived since 1969 peacefully. And I will remind you that at that time of teething troubles, Singapore, which you may look on now as an icon, but it had 4 times as many riots as we did, and they were bloodier. The Maria Hertog riots were certainly racial, and far worse than anything this country has ever seen. But people forget, and they've forgotten about Singapore. They don't let us forget about 1969. Now, I can't forget 1969 because I acquired my daughter. I adopted a daughter. She was an abandoned baby in a Sunta hospital, and the night the riots broke out, I drove my husband to this What have I done? I've done it. Right, I'll keep my hands away. I drove Carl to be admitted for observation only with a stomach condition to a Sunta hospital. Well, many people didn't get in. We lost touch with each other for 2 whole weeks. And when we spoke for the first time, he told me I had a daughter. I said, oh no. Oh no, we don't. We've got 2 boys. That's enough. But he very cleverly enlisted the help of the 2 boys, so it was 3 to 1. And the result was my daughter, whom you may know as Samantha Schubert. And when he left the hospital, the nuns gave him maternity leave and said he was the only man who'd ever been in the Assunta with a stomach condition and come out with a baby. So sometimes good comes out of bad. But let's look now at the skin of the snake. At independence, they wanted all things British. It was to be a constitutional monarchy. But unfortunately, they had 9 royal rulers. How were they going to choose? So they looked at a state called Negri Sembilan, Sembilan meaning 9, which originally had 9 undans from Minangkabau. The undans were ruling chieftains, and they used to fight for the throne. And then they decided on a system of election. And they elected not a sultan, but a Yang di Pertuan Besar. And to this day, the Yang Tuan of Negri, you're going to hear the ideas man Aberdeen, and he's the son of the present Yang Tuan of Negri. So what the country did was to adopt this system, and the Conference of Rulers meet, and they vote for a Yang di Pertuan Angkor, he who is the supreme amongst us all. And the first one, of course, being Malaysians, very gracious people you are, they chose the ruler of Negri, and his picture is on your $10 note. And I say this because his grandson is Tunku Imran, the great sportsman and Olympic pencil man. He has rather conspicuous ears, and this served him to good purpose. He was a great sportsman, and he went to Japan in order to play in the Interport Squash Championship. They told him at this end, as a royal, he didn't need a visa. When he got to Japan, they disagreed. And they said, why haven't you got a visa? Are you foreign service? No. Well, why? Well, I'm royal. Prove it. Now, how do you prove that you're royal? Flash your wrist? Blue blood? No. And then he had a brain wave. He said, look at my ears. And he took out the $10 note. Look at my ears. That's my grandfather. And it got him through. But we took the head of the snake, we took the British system and improved on it. We brought in a very Malaysian stamp by innovation and creativity. For instance, the charming custom of 5-year kings. Having selected the Anglican turn Agon, he reigns for 5 years, then steps down. This gives everybody else a chance. A very gracious, power-sharing Malaysian touch. With regard to our political leaders, the first 3 were transitional. We had to wait till we got to a cussed gentleman called Tun Dr. Mahathir before we became transformational. Now, the transitional leaders, the first 3, were all educated in the vicinity of the River Thames. They all did law in the Inns of Court, and they were very Anglophile. So they continued a lot of the British traditions until Dr. Mahathir came along. At the time, Tunku Rasawi was quite convinced with his sense of destiny, having been born in an Istana and saw himself as the second Tunku Abdul Rahman, that he would acquire the throne. So he was absolutely appalled when this peasant from our staff, a peasant, overtook him, because they democratized UMNO and the succession was by contest, and Mahathir won. And he plunged the country into a very vibrant, very vigorous transformation stage. He inherited a commodities-based economy, brought in manufacturing, the first electronics in Penang, of course, and Andy Groves of Intel came here to take a look, and Lim Tong Yu took him to an industrial estate, and it was muddy, they got sludged up to the knees, and he thought that was the end of it. But Andy Groves was very impressed when that very afternoon, the Chief Minister sent in the lorries and made up the road. So you got Intel, and you got all the others. And ladies, that led to the emancipation of women. Up to then, the ladies had been confined to the home. They had good fingers, because homebound, they did craft work. But when they set up the assembly plants and the factories in Penang, they brought in the women from the kampongs. This was their first emancipation, and they loved it. The men would not have stayed in those routine jobs at the same machines a lifetime.